What's up, and welcome back to the Inside The Rink Podcast. I am your host, Chris, and tonight we'll be talking about the Palat trade, some extensions around the hockey league, Barry Trotz steps down, Artemi Panarin, a trade update, Stadium Series, what happened last night, some playoff updates along each conference. But first, let me welcome in my co-host, Conrad. Conrad, how are you this evening?
Pretty good, Chris. I believe I mentioned it to you. Not as cold as it was. Bit of warmer weather coming over here in Manitoba. Minus 50 is not fun. It's been great. A lot of hockey to talk about. It feels like just the Olympics are coming up right away here, and just overall, I'm very pumped for the Olympics. I don't know about you.
I'm very pumped for the Olympics. I'm pumped for a little break from all the chaos of all the news out there, especially with the roster freeze, but getting into still watching hockey and seeing the best of the best go at it, representing their country. I can't wait for all of that. As for the weather update here in New England, it's a little bit warmer than it was the last couple of weeks. Rumors of 50. Again, can't wait for that. But let's get right into some news. Yesterday, news came across that Pickard. I'm going to butcher his name probably for the rest of my life as long as he's in the NHL. And Justin Kirkland were both surprisingly placed on waivers. A little surprising to me for Pickard. Kirkland, been in and out of the lineup in Calgary. Maybe he's a piece they have if they make a move at the deadline and he slides back into the lineup. But I'm curious what you think with the whole Edmonton goaltending situation.
So when this happened yesterday, and I didn't comment on it like I originally planned to, but this was a situation where Edmonton has 3 good goaltenders that could be on the NHL roster, but they're making cap room, and they're also going off of like, hey, you have limited roster spots, and why would you carry 3 goaltenders when you want a certain amount of forwards and defensemen on your roster? And it's also the kind of juggling guys getting healthy and all that. So I understand it from that perspective, but to me, it didn't make sense for them to carry 3 goaltenders if they weren't going to play one. So Pickard going down to Bakersfield, he gets playing time, and maybe you and I see him up with the Oilers again at some point this season.
Yeah, Pickard, this whole thing, like I said, it was interesting to me. And the reason why I say that is Connor Ingram's kind of come on. He seems like he's going to be the 1A, 1B with Jari, depending upon how they want to look at things. But Pickard could be a name, I guess, do we watch come trade deadline? I mean, having playoff experience, having the run he kind of had last year, helping lead them to a cup. Jordan Skinner wasn't in. Could that be something that intrigues somebody as a possible backup in case an injury happens to a playoff team? Maybe they get a piece back that could help their offense. I don't know what you think, and if I'm completely losing my mind and thinking that could be a possibility.
You're not entirely losing your mind, but like, there's so many goaltenders on the market that people say could be on NHL rosters, and it feels like Edmonton has 3 of them right now. So you saw Brossoit get traded a while ago now, or it feels like a while ago, but in terms of hockey, the hockey season, it is a while ago, but it's only just a few weeks ago, realistically. And who knows, when there's the need to be met around the league, that price raises up. So maybe Edmonton does cut their losses with one of their 3 goaltenders, but as of right now, I don't see them moving on from any of their 3 netminders.
Just a thought that crossed my head yesterday when I saw the fact he was being placed on waivers come across. But speaking of trades, we had a trade last week where we had Ondrej Palat was traded to the New York Islanders in exchange for a Maxime Sipilkov and a 3rd-round pick in the 2026 NHL draft and a 6th-round pick in the 2027 NHL draft. Palat, to this point, has played in 2 games since being traded with the Devils. Has not found the stat sheet yet, On the other side, Siplikov, 1 game for the Devils. For the Devils. I'm sorry, I just messed that all up. Palat for the Islanders, Siplikov for the Devils. He played in 1 game, had only 7 minutes of ice time. It was a very interesting trade. Palat kind of came out quick, where you saw the news of he was being scratched for a trade, and then it seemed like Twitter just went into a giant frenzy of where is Palat going.
And it feels like there was the frenzy there, but at the same time, when it comes to a player like Palat, who's won Stanley Cups, been on winning teams, if you're a team like New York, or I guess the Islanders, being more specific there with 2 New York teams, if you're on the up and up, why wouldn't you trade for a guy like Palat when you have good young guys and a decent veteran core around those young guys? It To me, this makes a lot of sense. In the case of Ondrej Palat, he gets a chance to be a very integral piece of whatever the Islanders are trying to build in the next few years. Chris, I don't know what you're thinking about this, but I really like the Palat trade to the Islanders.
I love him for the Islanders. Like I said, like you said, it's a perfect veteran fit to a young team that is rising to the occasion this season. I mean, coming into the season, you, me, a lot of other people did not have the Islanders as a playoff team. I think you might have with the Schaefer edition. But it now with where they're at in the season, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we talked about our Vesna picks with Sorokin. With what they've built this season and the momentum they have, I think that adding somebody like Palat to their lineup is a great addition. Siplikov's interesting that he is the part of the package going back in the trade. But realistically, he was a guy for the Islanders that was in and out of the lineup all season. Now he has some more playing time, especially with more injuries on the Devils lineup. And honestly, both sides, I like this trade. I like this trade a lot.
Yeah. And I don't know where we got the thing where I assumed they were a playoff team, because I'm looking at my predictions piece here. Just quickly going to there. On that note, Chris, I had them 6th in the Metro.
Maybe it was you might have had a comment about Schaefer and if he could take that next step in his rookie season, if they could be a playoff team. Maybe that was something you did say.
Maybe, and you might not be wrong in that sense. With that being said, Islanders, like, you kind of hit the nail on the head with that one, Chris. So the trade. I know the Carson Southey getting traded there too. Like, a couple of veteran moves for them, and overall, if they continue to add, and I know there's been a bit of rumblings with that, maybe the Islanders do move a first round pick this year, but that remains to be seen, solely off the fact that you don't know what happens after the Olympic break, because that's so much time off, because any team can gain momentum, and teams that have guys rested, that's a bonus for them if they don't have at their roster going to the Olympics, or even 5 key guys playing in this tournament. Like, rest is key at this point of the season, and the Olympic break, that provides so much of it for these teams.
One thing with the Olympic break, and I'm sure we're gonna talk about this throughout the next couple of weeks while they're on break, but it's the thing with the break is the hot teams, the break's coming at the wrong time. For the cold teams, the break's coming at the right time. It's just that kind of situation, and maybe that's where you could see things flip. We're going to talk about the way things stand right now in the playoff race in a little while, but you could certainly see things flip right out of the break, and we could have a whole different conversation come the first week of March going into the trade deadline. But some names who will not be moved at the deadline are Red Wings defenseman Ben Sherratt, who signs a 3-year, $11.55 million extension for a 3.85 AAV. He's played in 56 games this season, recording 12 points on 5 goals and 7 assists. He's a -3. And another extension was Avalanche defenseman Sam Malinsky, who has had a great season, a breakout season realistically. He signed a 4-year, $19 million extension for a $4.75 million AAV. In 53 games for Colorado, he has 25 points on 3 goals and 22 assists, and he is a plus 31. Which of these extensions really, I mean, they're both, I like both of them a lot. Which one to you is your favorite, if not both of them?
Well, Ben Sherratt, that one kind of surprised me, given that it's term for him in Detroit. And you look at Detroit's system, and they do need to shore up some depth. Obviously, they have a long-term plan for Sherratt, even if he becomes the number 7 in the end of the contract, Chris. When I look at Malinsky's deal, I'm like, okay, this is a guy that Colorado brought in, and he's developed, and the path was clear, and he rode the hot hand throughout the entire phase of development. You don't get that with every free agent or draft pick you sign that comes into your organization. Sam Malinsky is the perfect picture of a guy that you put a clear path for, and you have an idea in mind for the ideal forward or defenseman you want out of him, knowing the limitations of the player. Malinsky's never going to be a top pairing guy, but he's a really good complementary depth piece, and he could be a supplemental top 4 player. I think the way that he's been developed, you see it now, but over time, there's got to be like questionable, like, oh, how, like, what am I working towards? And that's in any career realistically, but like in his case, it could feel kind of dull when you think about it. But Sam Malinsky and his extension in Colorado, it shows one, hard work pays off and patience pays off, because it could feel, as I said, maybe it wasn't a very patient time in his life, but he gets the big extension, and he's been very, very integral to Colorado's defense this year.
Yeah, Malinsky's been a huge piece for them, sliding in with the injuries they've had, and we've talked about those. And he's, slid into, like you said, that middle pair or that bottom 6 or that bottom line pair on defense. The Sherratt extension was very interesting to me covering the Red Wings, because it was like Monday, the report came out that they were interested in adding to their decor and looking for a second line center. And, the news about Edvinsson had been kind of circulating that he was going to be out with an injury until after the Olympic break. And then the next morning, boom, Sherratt extension. And it was, I think covering the Red Wings, looking at them, my opinion and my gut says this was shore this up, go out, and then figure out what piece can be a complementary piece in that top 4 defensive pairing. Because Edvindsson's going to be back. They're expecting him back after the Olympic break. Now you have Sherratt, Seider, Edvinsson, and you really need that 4th defenseman for this to be a solid team come playoff time and avoid that March collapse. Because in the bottom pairing, you can mix and match with Hamonic and Bernard Docker and Johansson and what they have. So I do like this move. It's also a veteran who can help with the growth of Johansson and the growth of Sandin Pellikka, who I forgot to mention right there to be a bottom 6, the bottom pairing defenseman. They just, great move. I'm intrigued to see what keeping Sherratt for 3 more years, what they're going to go do and what they're going to add. Maybe is it go trade for a young defenseman that they can bring in and have Sherratt be that mentor for the next 3 years, and they sign an extension to that defenseman. But overall, both of these extensions, I like them a lot, and I think they're going to benefit both teams in the long run. That's my gut feeling.
Like, I kind of going off your point there, Chris. Ben Sherratt kind of benefited off that veteran presence on the blue line with Dustin Byfuglien and a lot of the guys that Winnipeg had when he was in Winnipeg. And I know the mass departure and the defense that they did have for a couple of years following his departure, like, it wasn't great, but he benefited off of that immensely. And you're probably going to see in Detroit that he's going to do the same for another young defender. that's just kind of the way that things go in the league. So give or take, that's what you get out of Ben Sherratt. He's been steady. And the game that I covered when Detroit was in Winnipeg, he was steady, simply put. He didn't do anything flashy, but he played defense and he did it well.
I think that's the perfect way to put it. He's a steady player and he fits the Detroit system well. And you actually segued perfectly right there. You mentioned departure. And today, in a surprising piece of news, the Predators GM, Barry Trotz, announced that he will be stepping away. And he said that he is retiring. He is not going into coaching, but he is going to stay in the position until they find somebody to replace him. It sounds like the plan realistically for the Predators organization is that they're going to hopefully have a replacement before the draft. It sounds like Trotz will still be in place come the time of the deadline. And this is a guy who has been there for 2.5 years in the GM role. He's brought in, he made a big splash after his first season, bringing in Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea. And I mean, this was really surprising to me today. I did not expect this in any way, especially, I mean, the Predators are only 4 points back of a playoff spot. And I'm curious, like, he's still going to be there, but are they going to have a whole retool and blow this thing up? Or what's the feel like on your side?
I don't think it's going to be a fire sale. I think Trotz is going to he's going to leave something that the next GM of this franchise can work on. While the news is surprising, you have to look at, given his age and how long he's been in the game, Chris. You look at a guy like Barry Trotz, he's respected. He's brought in respected veterans, and does he go out kind of with a bang? Does he make a big trade? Does he make a big trade that kind of alters the trajectory that he had the team on, or does he move the veteran guys for what he can get for them? Like, realistically, they're not in the best situation, but they can work around kind of the contracts they do have. And off of name value alone, Barry Trotz could trade guys like Stamkos, Marchessault, and getting even bolder from what he didn't sign, like what was there beforehand. There's a lot to work with, but I don't see it being anything drastic.
The one thing with Barry Trotz, and I mean, he won a cup with the Capitals in 2019, I believe it was. But this is a guy that back in 2003 broke the record for the most games coached with an expansion team in his 392nd game coaching the Nashville Predators. And yeah, I think this is something where he was kind of looking at this going, it's my time, it's time to retire. He just doesn't want to do this anymore, and he's stepping away. It's tough. It's coming halfway through the season, but he's done his time. He has his cup. He won 2 Jack Adams awards as a head coach. You know, obviously his time in coaching is done, and he's stepping away, and I think he's doing it in his own terms, which is perfect. But again, very surprising, and I'm intrigued. Like, what's coming? I mean, I feel like there is something coming. Maybe it's not a giant fire sale, like you said, but they're going to make some moves, whether it's adding, subtracting, or even want that middle ground. You know, add some pieces for the future that can play right now and help them right now to maybe even make the playoffs and get some of those young pieces like Svechkov and, you know, get them some playoff experience while they're in the lineup. And it's a whole interesting situation out there in Nashville that I had them in the playoffs this year. And right now, being 4 points out, I like maybe they have a chance, but I don't know with Trotz stepping away and what they're going to do over the next month if that's going to sustain the way things are right now.
And yeah, that remains to be seen. But kind of, we both hit the main point of it. Everything, Chris. It feels like murky waters for Nashville right now, and the seasons that they've had under Trotz as GM, it feels like just back and forth, just ping pong kind of deal. So you have to wonder if, and I emphasize if for a reason, because maybe there is somebody coming in they do have in mind, and it's just this is what they have now, but it's just a contract deal. But until that's kind of decided, you have to look at the entire scope of things. Maybe he's filling the seat because Nashville doesn't have someone in mind, or they don't feel confident that said candidate will get them through the trade deadline, which is coming up in like 6 weeks or so, or I guess a month from now. It is February. Chris, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but for me personally, I feel like they're just going to stick Trotz out in the kind of the phase leading up to the trade deadline and just leave him, and after that, it's going to be the mutual kind of deal.
You made a point there, and kind of something that stuck in my head earlier when this news came out, and that is, do they potentially have somebody they have an idea of already in the system, in like their organization, that maybe they want Trotz there for the deadline to hit that person how he maneuvers things and see what happens and figure out the pieces they want to keep there long term, what they could get back in certain places. Like, I think that could be a thing. Or like you said, the other fact is maybe they don't have any idea what they're going to do, and he's not going to leave them high and dry and stick around until that point. And then after that, hey, I'll stay, but Kate, really start your search and really amp things up because I am done once the schedule ends. But that whole Nashville situation is something to monitor, especially after the trade deadline, where they go, what they look to do as an organization. Another organization that's looking to make some moves is the New York Rangers, who the other day announced that Artemi Panarin was being held out while they searched for a trade for him. And it sounded like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I'm pretty sure I saw, was that he is out until the Olympic break. And maybe, I don't know if he's back after the Olympic break or if they're going to continue to hold him out until
the plan is with Panarin, he's not going to play until like a trade is made, is what it's shaping up to be. And this should not be a surprise, given like it feels like the Rangers have waved the white flag on their season, admittedly, and Panarin being one of their biggest trade chips, like that's available on the roster. Where do the Rangers go knowing Panarin's going to be moved, and they kind of have to do a rebuild scenario?
Well, you and I had talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago when the Shesterkin injury hit. And we both said, we talked about it, and I kind of said right away, does this, with Shesterkin being out and going on injured reserve, is Panarin going to get moved? And it seems like you said, they're waving the white flag. They've accepted that they're not going to make the playoffs this year. It's time to retool. Panarin's now out. And so I saw something today come out about, where he could go with an extension, where he could not go with an extension, without an extension. And there's so many teams to watch for this. I mentioned when we first talked about the possibility of him getting traded, Carolina. And the big one that I keep seeing is Washington. And I'm intrigued by that. I also have seen all three West Coast teams in the mix as well.
Chris, I was going to say, hey, if there's any fit that feels right, Panarin loves the spotlight. You cannot deny that. I'm not saying Columbus or Chicago didn't have a spotlight, but why wouldn't you go play for the New York Rangers in Madison Square Garden, and you have all of that just shining on you? It's like, realistically, it's the equivalent of if you were to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs when you think about it. And now he's seeking that contract extension. You have to look at the LA Kings, Anaheim Ducks, San Jose Sharks, 3 West Coast California teams that he would possibly play for, but it's the whole nailed by like the nail driver of he wants a contract extension. Can any of those three teams do it? Washington's another team that you have to look at, given you don't know if Ovechkin's going to play after this season. Do you do a sign and trade kind of deal where Panarin comes with a contract extension, or do you hope you negotiate with him? Because given where Artemi Panarin is at and all the stuff that has been released on what could possibly become a trade scenario, Artemi Panarin's kind of due for one of these. He's due for a bigger haul. We've seen, or Chris, you and I have seen and read online that it could be a Brock Nelson level haul, but also it is one of those things, as I was kind of alluding to there. Does he sign an extension with that team? And I feel like that limits the buyers in a potential Panarin deal.
With some of those teams that we've mentioned, like the Capitals and the Kings and the Ducks, for three right off the top of my head, that just have a storyline that I really like. Like, so for instance, let's say the Capitals is potentially a trade destination for him. He goes and plays with Ovechkin, two Russians that play together. Ovechkin say it is his last season, and then Panarin has an extension. He stays and he takes over the face of that franchise. Another one is the Kings, and he goes to the Kings and he plays with Kopitar, trying to get Kopitar that last cup, and then he stays and he's the face of the Kings for the foreseeable future. Or the Ducks, where that's a team that the Rangers, he has multiple former teammates like Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider. He has that chemistry with those guys, and it's a young team building in the right direction where they're fighting for a playoff spot when many people thought they wouldn't be. So I like all of those storylines, and the Sharks are another team, like they just a young team that's up and coming. Like, this is such a fun story to watch. Like, I hate seeing a player not play, especially like fans buy tickets and they go see their favorite players play. And if you're a Rangers fan and Panarin's one of your favorite players, like now, say you got tickets for Christmas and now you're going to a game and he's sitting out because they're going to trade him. That part stinks, but at the same time, like, this is the aspect covering this game that makes things so much fun. It's all the question marks and all the storylines that could go with a trade to a team. And this is just going to be such a fun story to watch over the next couple of weeks, if not sooner. I mean, there's been rumors and we've talked about rumblings of do we think there's going to be a blockbuster trade before the roster freeze, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is Wednesday, right?
It is Wednesday.
So could we see something in the next 48 hours? If not, then it's going to come right after.
I was going to say, the way that things are shaping up, I feel like we've seen the big parts of the trade. You're seeing AHL level transactions, but I feel like that's about it for what we've seen so far. I feel like all the big trades are going to once that roster freeze lifts, it's going to be chaos.
Of course, we say every week, I think we're done. And then all of a sudden we get hit with another one. I mean, I think, was it last week we recorded a Monday and we said, I don't know. We ended the podcast with, what's the next domino to fall? And we both kind of said, well, this might be it. Like we said, I said Dougie Hamilton. And then we said it kind of got quiet there. And then all of a sudden Wednesday we got Palat, which not a huge domino, but a pretty sizable piece that got moved. So who knows? Maybe we're just doing our Inside the Rink curse right here, and we're talking about, wow, probably nothing within the next 48 hours, and tomorrow morning we're going to wake up and there's a giant trade. But that remains to be seen. A lot to sort out over the next 48 hours before the roster freeze, and then, like you said, all chaos could happen right after the freeze lifts. Speaking of freeze, last night was the Stadium Series in Tampa, Florida, which you hear Tampa, not supposed to be cold. It's cold. It was 40 degrees last night, I believe, right around puck drop, I thought I heard. But what a game. I mean, the Bruins lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning 6-5 in a shootout. We had a goalie fight. We had probably my personal opinion, the best outdoor game we've had, maybe even ever. I don't know how your thoughts are on that and what your takeaways are from the game, but that was my gut reaction from what I saw last night.
So my initial reaction, I watched the first period. I was just leaving the Moose game, and I was like, okay, I got to file some stuff. It's on the TV in the press box. Watch the first period there. Drive home through intermission. Get home just, I think it was a minute and a bit into the second period. Like, great, awesome. Sit down. What a game it was. I'm watching it with my dad, and goalie fight happens in Stadium Series game. You can't ask for anything better. The presentation, sure it was over the top. It was corny and all that, but you can't ask for anything more because they picked a theme and they went with it. Chris, I believe you're muted.
It was a great game. I clicked the button and it didn't unmute, so I don't know what just happened with my computer there. Gotta love
I saw the
technology.
click and
Apparently, every week we experience some kind of technical difficulties here. It's always something. Maybe that needs to be a T-shirt. Technical difficulties all the time, and just put our microphone with Inside the Rink on it. I don't know. It's always something with us. But last night, I mean, overall, the game, the atmosphere, all of it was fantastic. I like the intros, and overall, the game, it was a great game. So much intensity. I mean, I feel like every time you watch an outdoor game, you see high scoring. Like as a gambler, I almost every single time there's an outdoor game take the over, and it's overall overtime was a little tough. I mean, there was the situation with Pasternak and going down. I thought he scored. There was no. Why would you not blow the whistle there? And I mean, overall, great game. I don't know if we have the clip. We had Bruins Benders down there at the Stadium Series, and last night they talked to David Pasternak, and here's what he had to say about the whole situation in overtime.
This one is Marco Sturm, to be specific.
Okay.
I have to look at some of the calls. I know some of them were not in our favor. I can tell you that. We do have to do a better job, and they probably have to do a better job too. So again, overall, I don't blame them. It always comes back to us, and if you give a guy like Kucherov 10 minutes on the power play, you know, he did something wrong. So that's on us.
I mean,
did he give you an explanation?
No. Yeah. All he told me is watch it. So I don't know. I was, didn't get to talk to him after. Before a bit.
Chris, classic quote, kind of quote there, and the whole situation in overtime, like that was just a doozy when you think about it. Just having talked to coaches and all that, assistants in the AHL and head coaches both in the AHL and NHL, it's like you kind of understand, like they kind of default with their answers, but hey, they'll give you the analysis and insight that they'll give you, but that overtime thing is the one thing that's kind of burning my whistle here a little bit. How do you have the puck for so long? The play's not blown dead. I tweeted at the Benders too and whatnot. You score a goal on top of that, and then it's overturned, and the guy who scores the goal is put in the penalty box. What are we doing?
I don't get it. I don't get the whole situation. Like, I watched it multiple times after, everybody was posting on Twitter, making their comments about the whole situation. And I just kept watching, and I'm like, number one, I didn't see the penalty. Like, I don't see where there's a call there. And then going down, at first took me a couple of views to figure out where is the puck? And then I finally saw it. And maybe it's because I'm watching on my phone and not my big TV because I had looked away for a minute. But when I finally saw it, I'm like, what am I missing here? Like, why is he all of a sudden going to the penalty box? And I don't understand the situation. If you're a Bruins fan, 100%, you have every right to be pissed off about that whole situation. And the magnitude of the game, it's not like it was, the Rangers facing the Lightning, the worst team in the Eastern Conference is the best team. That was two teams in a play, like fighting for playoff positioning. The Lightning added 2 points, and the Bruins come away with one. There's so much more to that game that should not have been the situation that came from it.
And when you watch the game, like 5-1 lead goes overtime, Bruins lose in a shootout. Like, it's heartbreaking for Boston, but also that, like, I don't know what the whole thought process was in that case, but looking at it, I have friends who ref the game and all of that. Sure, it's not NHL level. I speak to a lot of off-ice officials and whatnot. I don't know if they would agree necessarily that that was a penalty, Chris. And I'm at the point where that's not a penalty, because unless you show what caused the penalty, where's the penalty?
Again, I don't see it. I don't see it. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit right there. 5-1. And that's the other thing. Like, the game should have never gotten to that. You were up 5-1. The momentum shifted after the goalie fight. I get it. Like, that changed the whole game. Tampa took charge after that. It was kind of said after the game, that right after it was just seemed like the ice tilted towards Tampa Bay. And, here we are, and we're going to get to it in about 2 seconds. But a little bit of a fluctuation to the playoff standings after that game.
Yeah, and Chris, Tampa and Boston playoff, two teams that are I don't know if they're still in playoff spots, but I believe the last time I saw they're in playoff spots. So yeah, Boston wildcard 1, Tampa top of the Atlantic. So those are two teams
right now.
Those are two teams
that
are. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I just messed myself up. I was trying to figure out the games played in the situation, but it's not the case right now. I thought for sure that was possibly our first round matchup, but it's not as things stand right now.
I mean, it very well could be, given how these teams they go through highs and lows, kind of peaks and valleys kind of deal. And Chris, when you think about it, Boston, Tampa, first or second round, that's a heavy hitting matchup regardless of the rosters they have. Those are two teams with kind of history in the playoffs.
I think the way things stand right now, a lot of teams that are in playoff spots are having those rivalries for, like, in general. And going right into the playoffs right now, I mean, the way we stand as of right now, as of recording, I think it's February 2nd? I don't even know what day it is anymore.
February 2nd, Monday, February 2nd.
So this is our last recording before the roster freeze, before the Olympic break. So as things stand right now, we are looking at a Lightning Sabres first round matchup, Red Wings Canadiens, Hurricanes Bruins, Penguins Islanders. And I had this conversation. I had a buddy over Friday night, and I just said a first round matchup, if it ever got to that point, of Bruins Red Wings, would drive my house wild. My fiance is a Bruins fan. I'm a Red Wings fan. All my friends are Bruins fans. If that was, and ironically, the first round of playoffs, I believe the Red Sox are playing the Tigers that same weekend. So it'll just be a Boston-Detroit weekend. But right now, the way things stand as of recording, I think these playoff matchups bring the high intensity that playoffs bring. I mean, you're going to see hard hitting from Bruins Hurricanes, two teams that face each other, I believe, in the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of years ago. If not, it was definitely a playoff matchup a couple of years ago. So there's just so many different situations. The Lightning facing the Sabres would be fun. I mean, we get Buffalo back in the playoffs. Tampa, the way they're playing, Montreal, Detroit, two original six teams going at it in the first round. The one thing that we need to talk about is the hard-charging Columbus Blue Jackets, who have somehow snuck back up in the Eastern Conference playoff race. They sit 6 points back of a wild card spot. They are 4 points back of the Islanders for that third spot in the Metro Division. Are we talking about the current playoff situation, the 8 teams that are there, or do we think Columbus, Washington, Florida, one of those 3 teams? I leave out Ottawa just because I'm hesitant with them. Any of those teams that are below right now that really stick out to you as we speak right now that could make that jump and be a playoff team?
I like how you mentioned a team that's on a 3-game losing streak and the other team you're leaving out because you're hesitant, but they're on a 3-game win streak. I understand the whole, the way you're looking at it, Chris, but we talked about it last week. I said it 10 points, 8 points, even 5 points. That's hard to make up in chasing teams. I love what Columbus is doing, and same with Washington. These are teams that have that veteran kind of talent with them, but they also have youth. And those two elements that kind of go hand in hand. Columbus, they have 2 games in hand on Boston. Sure, they're 7 points back from Boston, but what if they do get a couple of games and they start to close the gap on Buffalo, or maybe Boston falls out of that wild card spot? That's something you have to look at. When it comes to a team like Washington, they seemingly claw in to the playoffs every second, third year. They don't have a bad team. They have relatively the same team they had last season, and that's the same for Ottawa. But like I said it, Washington's closer than Ottawa is. Florida is, I think they were kind of decimated by injuries, and overall, if they can get healthy and coming back from the All-Star break, that's a team I'd watch to kind of really take a triumphant return, because 26 games or so left after you return from the Olympic break, that's a lot of games to work with. But you have to see these teams and the stretches they've gone on this season. Can they change that whole narrative that we're kind of putting out here, or do they fall into that same trap, into the same kind of the same patterns that kind of plagued them this year?
Now, the reason why I kind of alluded to it earlier about the Olympic break coming at the right time for some teams and the wrong time for some. If you look at the 8 teams in a playoff spot right now, all of them in their last 10 games have, except for one, have winning records. For instance, Tampa Bay is 8-1-1, Detroit 5-3-2, Montreal 6-3-1, Carolina 6-1-3, Pittsburgh 7-1-2, Boston 7-1-2, Buffalo 7-2-1. The one team I didn't mention was the Islanders, who are 5-5. They're 500 in their last 10. You talk about somebody like Columbus, who sits 4 points back of the Islanders. They're 9-1-0 in their last 10. So it's coming at the wrong time for some of these teams that are hot that could cost them when they get out of the break. But the Islanders at 5-0 in their last 10, they could flip the whole situation and have this become the break becoming at the right time where they can hold on to that final playoff spot. But you're having a hard-charging Washington coming, a hard-charging Columbus coming, and this is what's going to make this trade deadline, the post-Olympic break, all the more chaotic.
I didn't fucking realize that the 2 wildcard teams right now are both in the Atlantic, and I'm going off of the Atlantic race. The teams in the Metropolitan Division, there's a 4-point gap there. Mm-hmm. And I had that moment of realization when you said it, Chris. And I was like, oh shit. There's a bit of a closer gap in the Metro in those standings because I'm so used to looking at that wild card spot. And you like you said it perfectly there. Maybe the Islanders, they start this, maybe even Pittsburgh kind of sweats at their spot, because Columbus and Washington, those are two teams that could do real damage. But realistically, my argument does stand for the wild card with Florida. Is so many things have to go right for a team like Florida and Ottawa to even sniff a playoff spot. But Columbus and Washington, after you kind of brought me back to reality here, that looks a little bit more realistic, because 4 points is a lot easier to make up than 7 or 8.
See, to me, based on what I've seen, looking at Carolina and Pittsburgh in that Metro division, they feel safe because Pittsburgh has 2 games in hand, and they're also up 2 points on the Islanders. They have a game in hand and up 6 points on Columbus, and they're 3 games in hand and up 6 points on Washington. So they feel a little safe, especially with the last 10-game stretch they've been on. But the Islanders just don't feel as safe, and I think that's part of why we talked about the Palat trade, and they're a team to watch to keep adding, because they might be panicking a little bit with that 5-5-0 stretch in their last 10 games. And, the Columbus is charging. Washington, you said it perfectly, is a team that sneaks in at the end of the season. It feels like, if not holding that second and third spot all the time. So they're, again, a team to watch. Florida, to me, and we talked about this when we did our preview show, was a team that might feel the wrath of 3 Stanley Cup runs and their legs kind of getting to that point. And maybe that's part of where the injuries are coming in now, and, missing some key pieces. That might be what keeps them out of the playoffs this year and bring us a different Stanley Cup champion.
That it feels like we're headed towards a different Stanley Cup champion this year, but Chris, it's a never say never scenario. That's kind of how it's shaped up all year long. But you look at other teams around the league and you're like, how does Florida in their current state get past, say, Tampa Bay? And if they do meet them in the Stanley Cup Finals, how do they get past Colorado? There's so many good teams. There's 2 really good teams, one in each conference, and then a lot of really strong teams outside of that. As I said, how do you mentally gear up for that?
Yeah, I don't think you can. And I think that's where we're going to kind of run into that point throughout the season, like throughout the playoff run, is I think you're going to see the strong teams throw their weight around and they're going to prevail. I think this is one of those years where it's, last year Florida was one of those bottom teams that got in and they made that deep run. I think this is a top-heavy year where you're going to see those top teams make that deep run in the playoffs. That's my gut feeling. But again, you can always have upsets. It is the Stanley Cup playoffs. You never know. But the way things stand right now, I think Tampa, Detroit, Carolina, Pittsburgh, I really want to just say all 4 Atlantic teams, because if you look at the top 10 in the whole league overall, I believe all 5 Atlantic teams that are in the playoffs right now are in the top 10. So you talk about throwing, like, who would have thought when we had the conversation about a new GM in Buffalo, we'd be talking about the Buffalo Sabres as a top 10 team in all of hockey this season. This is a team that just made a giant change to the organization, and they are one of the best teams this season in hockey. Like, it's just the Atlantic Division, Carolina, and Pittsburgh. 10 teams, 7 of them are in the top 10 in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be a bloodbath when the Eastern Conference playoffs start.
Yeah, and the Eastern Conference is just, I don't know about you, it's like I don't feel as drawn to it as I am with the Western Conference, Chris. Like, go ahead.
the Western Conference is just chaotic, and do you want to get to it now? I don't know if we can cover much more of the East and how chaotic it is.
I don't have like Eastern Conference is chaotic, but Tampa Bay and Carolina they're the only two threats in my opinion. You look at the West, Chris, that's kind of where things lie in my opinion.
I mean, the West, we talked about Colorado, Minnesota, Dallas. They're still holding strong in that top three. I put my foot in my mouth last week with Utah, who had a rough week. I said they had to get 6 points, and 2 of those had to come against Dallas. Now they didn't get that. They lost to Dallas. They didn't even get 6 points. They got 4. But right now in the Pacific, Vegas, Edmonton, and Seattle hold those 3 spots, and the wild card is Anaheim and Utah. We got the Kings and the Sharks hovering as they have. It feels like between the Kraken, Ducks, Kings, and Sharks, those 4 teams have flip-flopped between 2-3 spots for the last 2-3 months. But now we got to talk about the Nashville Predators, who we talked about are 4 points back of a playoff spot, but also the hard-charging Winnipeg Jets.
No.
Are they going to make it?
No.
Are they going to make it?
No.
Sure?
11, you don't lose 11 games and then suddenly come back for some fucking miraculous playoff run. Chris, I cover the team. I was born and raised here, and I've seen them at their best, and I've seen them at their lowest this season. Having covered this team this season and last year, I can tell you this. Just the drastic difference is losing Nikolai Ehlers. This team they're old and they're slow. They cannot keep up with these teams ahead of them. And 9 points out of a wild card spot. Lo and behold, you look at the Central Division where Winnipeg has 51 points and the Dallas Stars, third in the Central, have 73 points. Let that sink in for you. This team, if they didn't go on an 11-game losing streak, fine. If it was 5 games, I could see your point where, okay, maybe they make the playoffs. Right now, it feels like they have to make a decision on their season. They have too much good talent. Do they add another top 10 prospect? You can't say for sure. Realistically, Winnipeg is in the situation where you have to go and you have to gut the veteran guys you have on the roster. I could speak on end for this, and I can. But there's so much on that roster right now. The Tanner Pearsons, Cole Koepke's, Gustav Nyquist's. I'm not saying they're holding them back. This is a team. They had an idea in mind to bring in veteran guys, and you're hoping that Gustav Nyquist could find some sort of spark that he had from his 70-point season a couple of years ago. But right now, you have 8 or 9 points from Gustav Nyquist and no goals scored. He's in his late 30s. Just, you can't hold on to those hopes, and maybe he'll do it. Jonathan Toews having even 20 points this season is considered a win. Why is it the same for Nyquist? I've gone into this with articles, Chris. My frustrations are shared a lot. If you cover the team, if you attend games, whether you're a writer or, as I said, you attend games as a season ticket holder, I've connected with people from both sides, and the frustration is the same. It's just, where's the consistency? Winnipeg should be a good team on paper, but you're sitting right now 22, 25, and 7, 51 points and 9 points out of a wild card spot. It feels like they have blundered this year, and they're not giving up.
This is where I wonder. Last year, we had the St. Louis Blues make that run, and it came right around this time is when it started. And could we be seeing Winnipeg do it? Because We have this conversation every single week where you and I, we don't trust the Kraken. Okay, so that opens up the third spot in the Pacific. Enter Kings, Sharks, Ducks, whatever. But if you look at their last 10, they're sitting, those two teams, the Kings and the Sharks, are sitting worse than the Jets are. And, we talked about Nashville. Maybe they do make an overhaul, and that opens the door. Because, again, there's 2 wildcard spots available. The Ducks might move up into that third spot if the Kraken continue to slip. And now there's 2 wildcards. I think we kind of agree Utah looks like the team that's going to take one of those 2. The other one is wide open to the Kings, Sharks, Predators, Jets. The Jets have that experience to make that kind of run. They have the goalie that could lead them to make that run. Again, they had a rough stretch. Part of that, Connor Hellebuck not being there. He's back. He's healthy. He's going to play in the Olympics, so he's going to keep the momentum. They could very well make a run, and they could be a team that is intriguing come playoff time if they can make that spot. Now, again, a lot in front of them. A lot has to break their way for that to happen. But very, very possible, because it seems like they could. Again, I said it for the Eastern Conference. I said it earlier in the podcast. This break could be coming at the right time for some teams, that we get 1, maybe 2 teams that make a run and get into that final wildcard spot and make some noise in the playoffs.
And I realistically don't believe Winnipeg is a part of that. They haven't shown, even when Hellebuck was back in the lineup, that they're the team that they were when Connor Hellebuck had to get his injury. I understand that Eric Comrie's been better in his last 6 games or so, and other guys are producing. Cole Perfetti's kind of stepped up. Look at the teams in front of them. And Chris, I wrote about this recently, is like they need to make a decision on their season, and it feels like they haven't. Even just 5 points behind Nashville, you don't have games in hand. Sure, you have a game in hand on Dallas, but Dallas being 22 points ahead of you, that's so many points to try to make up if you were to even sniff a divisional spot. But 9 points into the wild card, I don't mean to be doom and gloom here, but this is looking at the team that is, they haven't been able to they haven't been able to stretch anything together. And Scott O'Neill said it in the loss to Detroit 5-1 at home, Hockey Night in Canada. It was the most embarrassing loss that he had undergone as head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. And that kind of says something when you think about it. They didn't immediately win anything massive or blow the next team out when the coach called the team out. They win 1, they lose 1, they've won 1. If they win against Dallas tonight, you go 3-1-0 on the road trip. If you lose tonight, regulation or overtime, like extra time, that's 2-1-1 or 2-2-0, whatever it may be. Winnipeg is in the situation where now is the time you have to string together wins. And if you don't string together at minimum 5, you are done. And I'm going to end it on this thought, Chris. It's now, and if it's not now, you kind of sell high on what you do have, and you go from here and you build into next season. And I wrote about it recently, as I said, you got to focus on next season, because right now you're not in the position to compete.
My gut feeling, and this is what's kind of in a tough spot for Winnipeg, is they have a favorable schedule coming out of the break that could help them be into that conversation a little bit more, facing the Ducks twice, facing the Sharks, the Blackhawks. There's a chance to get some points there. The problem is the trade deadline. So what team are they going to have when that run needs to be made? That could be what holds them back. I agree with you. There's teams in front of them, but there's teams that you and I have talked about almost every other week when we have discussions on playoff teams that we don't trust. The Kings did get Kopitar back, and they did, compete this weekend. They lost to the Hurricanes, I believe, in overtime on Sunday. They did they get points. They're getting points. We say the same about Vegas. I mean, they got points. That's all they do is get points. They lose in overtime or a shootout, it seems like. But then we talk about the Ducks and we talk about the Sharks, two young teams who have had their hurdles throughout the season. We talk about the Kraken, who we don't trust. And that opens the door for somebody like Winnipeg, who has playoff experience. Also opens the door, we could talk about somebody like Nashville, who has, the veterans that sitting 4 points back could be a team that we do talk about, despite what happened today with Barry Trotz. But you and I have so much to talk about over the next couple of weeks with playoffs, trade deadline. I mean, we're going to have an Olympic break where we could have little segments each week because there's not going to be not much news to talk about. So until then, I think maybe we come up with brainstorm with ideas for next week's episode about maybe in and out again, maybe something else, but we can certainly have conversations. There's so much that's going to happen between the next 48 hours, and then we have Olympics, so much hockey. I can't wait.
I can't wait for it either. And Chris, this time next week, it's going to be Olympic hockey. That I feel like that's going to be the focus on top of what may or may not have happened before the roster freeze. So until then, thank you guys for listening.
Have a great week, everyone. Enjoy.